to the Action Podcast. Here's your host, my dad.
Well, welcome back to the XM Podcast. It has been a few extra weeks since we have put out an episode, and that is simply because a lot of life has happened after my last conversation and episode with my colleague Rachel Kyer. Since then, my wife and I had our second child, and quickly after that, we all got COVID and are prayerfully on the other side of that. So with that being said, I am so glad to launch this episode to talk about an amazing organization and ministry that was a huge part of my journey in finding faith in high school, and now is something that I support in many different ways as an adult. My guest is a great friend of mine who has dedicated his entire life to serving junior high school, and college kids and leading them to Christ. Young Life has been a great resource for me as a therapist with teens who feel disconnected, needing community, or being immersed in a fun Christian environment. Right after these words, please welcome my guest, who is the area director of the Western Reserve area of Ohio, Mark Eger. Do you want to be part of a team that is faith-based and clinically focused? If you're a licensed therapist that lives in any of the 50 states and interested in doing telecounseling, or maybe you're located in Northeast Ohio and you are interested in doing telecounseling or even in-person therapy, Emerge Counseling Ministries might be the right team for you. We have been helping people for over 50 years and want you to be part of our next generation of therapists. Go to emerge.org/careers for more information. We offer very competitive pay, along with benefits and a signing bonus. Contact us today to start helping people find rest and live free tomorrow. We can't wait to meet you.
My name's Mark. I've been on Young Life staff the last 10 years. I have coached throughout those 10 years, multiple sports, coached basketball, coached baseball, coach track a little bit in there. Worked with students of all ages, college age, high school age, middle school age. Had a quick semester as a elementary school gym teacher. So worked with kids with disabilities throughout that too. So worked with a lot of different types of students.
Nice. And correct me if I'm wrong, you were quite a baseball player back in the day.
That feels like a different lifetime ago. But in college, played baseball. Had a brief stint, and when I say brief, a couple weeks playing professionally before I figured out that I was not that good.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty impressive, though. I mean, even a brief stint playing professionally is that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's good. Talk to me a little bit about Young Life for our listeners who may not have a connection with Young Life, and we'll talk a little bit about both of our histories in Young Life and why it's been so important for me and my family. But talk to our listeners about what it is.
Yeah, Young Life is an adolescent ministry. Its roots are in high school, but as adolescence has grown, it's evolved into middle schools and also into colleges. And there's also ministries with kids with disabilities, and there's also ministry with teen moms.
Yeah.
And so I would say Young Life is a little less pastoral and a little bit more missional minded. I like to describe it as, if you were going to go overseas to do mission work, you would travel there, you would spend there, you would live your life there and live among the people and earn the right to be heard and to share the gospel. And so Young Life's very similar in that there's high schools right down the block that most kids don't know who Jesus is.
Yeah.
And so Young Life leaders show up at the high school, get to know kids. It's very relational. And the goal is to earn the right to be heard, and with the hope at some point to be able to tell them about Jesus Christ.
That's good. And Young Life is not a new ministry.
No, it's been around 80 years.
80 years, is that right?
80 years.
I knew it was a long time. I didn't realize it was that long.
Yeah, 80 years. You might need to fact check me on that, but
I knew it was a long time, but that's
right
great.
Right around 80 years. So the official date was 1941.
Wow.
But there was even some Young Life before that.
Yeah.
And now it's 50 states, but now it's been international in over 100 countries.
Wow. Talk to me about what is your role in Young Life? What is it that you do? What would you say you do here?
What would I say I do here? So Young Life has been in this area for close to 45 years. And so it started as one school. And so ministry kind of expanded from that and expanded into different communities. So there became a need to oversee just the different ministries in different communities. So my role is really to recruit and train leaders, to build teams, and to send those teams into different locations to do ministry with kids. So right now in this area, we have 5 different ministries, 5 different teams that we send to do ministry with different demographics.
I'll tell you, and you know a little bit about my history. You know, I grew up in a Christian home, which was good, but it was Young Life that really solidified my faith in Jesus Christ. And it was so important because it got me surrounded by some older guys in my life that I looked up to that really invested in, I think I really was like 8th and 9th grade were like the big years for me of realizing, well, wait a minute, there's these dudes are like juniors and seniors in high school, and they're seeking me out. And they were baseball players. I was a baseball player. And it was just, I remember thinking like, either these guys seem cool, but why are they hanging out with an 8th grader and a 9th grader? And then I realized it was because they just love Jesus. And it was huge for me. I mean, that's kind of the model, is it not, for Young Life? It's about older high school and college students breathing life into younger people.
Yeah, I always like to think of Young Life as playing offense rather than defense.
Yeah,
that we're going to come to you, not just kind of wait for you to figure it out. And so I think anybody who has a Young Life story has a similar story of just men who started showing up. And you had no idea what was going to happen after that.
That's right.
And that was a story for me when I was in high school. I had a baseball coach who, after being around him for a year, found out he was a Young Life leader, and he was the one that introduced me to the Lord. And that's the thing, is I think most people's model of what a Christian man is an older, someone with a suit, and I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that, but to a high school student, especially a high school student that didn't grow up in the church, that's intimidating. And so, with Young Life, there are students at every high school who know the Lord, and it's equipping them to lead and to share their faith with their friends and coming alongside them. So it's some of my favorite Young Life stories are juniors and seniors who you teach to care and love for their friends and for their teammates, and the freshmen on the baseball team who, kind of in the same way, are going to earn the right to be able at some point tell their friends about the Lord. Yeah.
I think the other cool thing about Young Life, it's not necessarily affiliated with a church. It's a Christian organization that is independent. And, a lot of churches have great youth groups and great programs for kids, which is great and awesome. But a lot of times, if I'm a non-believing kid and my parents aren't going to church, and those programs and stuff aren't really things that I'm just going to end up at. But Young Life is definitely something that I remember a lot of times on a Monday night when we would have what we call club. I'd look around and there'd be dudes at club that had never touched the inside of a church, and you would never imagine that they would, but because a bunch of their friends or whatever were going to this thing on a Monday night, they may go and hear about Jesus. Talk to me a little bit about the rhythm of Young Life and why it works.
Yeah, that was some of my experience too. I remember being invited to Young Life a lot in high school, and knowing it kind of in my mind. I didn't grow up in a Christian home, but knew it had something to do with Christianity. And so I initially didn't want any part of it, and then for whatever reason ended up showing up at one of my friends' homes. He had club in his basement, and had no idea what to expect. And I walked downstairs, and there's 50, 60 kids down there. There's music. Everyone looks like they're having a great time. And I started looking around the room, and it wasn't who I expected to be there.
Yeah.
I looked around the room, and I'm like, what are they doing here? I know that they're not a Christian. I know that they're not a Christian. I know that they're not a Christian. And it just blew my mind. And I think it really shaped a lot of my understanding of what Christianity is and was, is that it's for every kid.
Yeah.
Every kid deserves the right to hear about Jesus Christ, whether they grew up in a Christian home or if they did not. And at the end of that club, I remember my Young Life leader standing up and pulling a Bible out of his back pocket, and he shared a story. And the question he asked, and I feel like he was pointing right at me, but he said, "Do you want to get well?" And it was from the story of the invalid by the pool.
Yeah.
And I don't know if this is true, but it felt like he was pointing right at me and asking me that question, do you want to get well? And at the time, I had no idea what that meant. But many years later, that question means a lot more to me now than it did then. And that's a question that I feel like every kid, whether they know it or not, is asking themselves. But Young Life, the rhythm is we do something called Club. We do that in kids' basements. And kind of the thought there is that most kids won't show up at a church, but they'll show up in their friend's basement. Yeah, that's Young Life's big outreach during the week. So try and fill the basement with as many kids as possible, and it's probably the best way to describe that is it's fun. And relevant to kids. It's songs and games that are relevant, not outdated. Every club ends with a Young Life leader standing up and giving a talk about who Jesus is. And it's towards the kid who has never heard the name Jesus before. Yeah. So it's to the furthest out kid. And, a lot of kids get to club not because leaders are inviting them, but because their friends are inviting them. And so something else we do during the week is called campaigners. And that's... We get kids together, and it's an opportunity to help them grow in their faith, teach them how to read Scripture for themselves, because a lot of times kids have never done that. Yeah, it's to teach them to pray, because once again, a lot of kids have never done that before, but it's also an opportunity to teach kids how to share their faith and care about their friends in ways that they might not know how to do. And so at campaigners, it's where we talk about their friends too, and talk about club, and hey, how can we get their friends to a place where we can tell them about Jesus? Yeah. I remember thinking back to my time in high school and getting involved in Young Life, and we would end up being at somebody's house. Eventually, we overtook a friend of ours' barn where we would have club, but it would be hilarious because you'd get to club and it would be like clown cars. It's like, how many people could you fit in your car? Like, it was almost like these upperclassmen would drive around our town and put as many kids into the car as possible. Probably wasn't the safest thing in the world, but then you pull up and you see like 15 kids get out of an Escort. You know what I mean? But it was the coolest thing. I mean, when I was going to school, I mean, we would have hundreds of kids on a Monday night. Like 150 kids would show up, and we would sing songs and we'd play silly games, and it would be hilarious, and we'd have a ton of fun. And then we would listen to, a short message about Jesus. And it's amazing to me, being in my mid 40s now, the relationships I still have because of those times. Guys that have been in my life for the last 30 some years, because of the relationships that we started during that time, and then the guys that we have grown in our faith as husbands, as parents, and now helping each other raise our kids. And it's amazing to me that so many of the relationships that I've had for years and years and years all started in Young Life. And a lot of what I feel like, and you can speak to this, it's about the bond that we create with these other people in our lives. I mean, Young Life to me is so relational. Talk to me a little bit about the relational aspect of Young Life, but then also you took it to another level. It's like you're now pursuing that and have been doing that as a career for quite a while. What was the draw? Yeah, my Young Life leader in high school, I saw how big of an impact that he had. We're still friends today. He still has a huge impact. And I would even say with Young Life, we would even say it's success to plant seeds in high school that maybe 10 years down the road, you see the fruit of that. And so, I think you see a lot of Young Life leaders who meet and are invested in kids in high school, but those relationships go way beyond high school, and last a lifetime. And so, I think just even that influence in my life has been attractive to me in terms of, this is how I want to live my life. This is something I want to do with my life. And, I think my senior year of high school, there were these freshmen I was spending time with. And I think at that point, it's like, this is what I want to do with my life. I want to invest in other people. And so as I look for opportunities to do that in my life, the best way that I was able to do that is to continue to do Young Life. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a lot of people's stories. I think you see kids in high school who met the Lord through Young Life, and then they became volunteer leaders in college, where they started showing up at high schools and investing in kids. And then a lot of those, go on, pursue a life in ministry, whether that's in Young Life or another ministry, or there's a lot of pastors who have a history in Young Life. Yep. And so I think it's a lifetime of discipleship, rather than just a season. But it's I think in high school you get taught and you're given seeds of what a lifetime of following the Lord is. Yeah. And then as those continue to get watered throughout someone's life, it's a lifetime of ministry. It's a lifetime of discipleship.
So you've been now in ministry for how long, working with teens, adolescents?
Been on staff with Young Life for the last 10 years. Before that, worked at a Christian high school for 5 years, where I worked and coached.
So Mark, share a little bit about your perspective on being able to be in at the ground levels, spending time at high school, spending time with young adults, and just give us a little bit of a better background to maybe help some parents out and going, what's going on in the schools and what are you noticing?
Yeah, and I would say of all the years that I've been around students, I would say there's nothing new, but I would just say it's a lot deeper and thicker. And I think kids are at the core very similar. They need places to connect. They need relationships. They need a place where they belong. Mm-hmm. They need meaning. And I would say there's a lot of things right now that are at a disadvantage when it comes to those things, especially after the last few years in terms of being isolated. Relationships are very difficult. Social media is such a big thing. These are all things that I think a lot of us are aware of. But, just even, there was a kid I was talking to the other day that, it's kind of funny, but kind of the undertones of it, it's having a relationship, kind of a dating relationship with someone, but it's all over Snapchat. Mm-hmm. Like, they don't interact at school. It's just all interaction through Snapchat. So living their lives through social media. And I think, from a perspective kind of outside of that, the struggle is that somewhere where you engage with kids, or is that somewhere where you push back? So it's, I think that's a question, most kids are living their lives through social media. Is that somewhere where we really engage and meet kids at? Or is that somewhere where we try and pull them out of that? Yeah. To have just normal, typical, face-to-face interaction.
I think that's one of the reasons that, I love Young Life, and I love a lot of ministries, but Young Life is like the ground troopers. It's like the Young Life is the ones that go into the schools, and we have a lot of leaders who are coaching sports and doing different things at the actual place where the kids are at. And this is nothing against youth groups for churches, but the kids have to get to that to get what they're trying to get out of a youth group or something along those lines. Young Life is like this militia group, and I mean that in the kindest, most gentlest way, that gets into where the kids are at. And I think that's so important. And there was a study that I just read about recently that I forget how many, it was a couple hundred kids, and they allowed this one group A to spend all this time on their social media that they would normally spend over a 2-week period, and then this other group took a break from social media. And the results of those two groups, the group that wasn't on social media had much less symptoms of depression, anxiety, stress, all of these things that I think God created us to be connected with each other. And I think social media, I think there are good aspects about it. I think there are good things about it, but I think too many people are living their lives through it, and it's not a reality anymore. Mm-hmm. And we're seeing these things in China right now where people are living virtual reality lives, and we're essentially disconnecting from the ability, like you and I are sitting a couple feet apart, eyeball to eyeball, connecting with each other. And I do think that's what the enemy wants. I think the enemy wants us to be disconnected. And I think that's a massive, massive problem that we're facing in America, the desensitization of the relationship. And, this past week, a horrible event happened in Texas. I mean, it is literally breaking my heart. And it is unimaginable to me what must happen to a 17-year-old kid to desensitize him to the point where lives are so insignificant, but something's going on, and something's been going on for a long time. This is nothing new, but it's not getting fixed. And I think it's a fear that parents have. I think it's a fear that kids have. There is no way that kids don't get concerned to go to school, certainly after an event like that. And I know there's been a lot of conversations as clinicians that we've been having over the last couple of days with our teen students, and it's a massive, massive thing. And I think a lot of it is kind of what we're talking about, is not being accepted, not feeling heard, not feeling like you fit in. I mean, there's so many things. And again, we're not trying to solve the mystery or the problem, but really talking about it. And I think that an organization and a ministry like Young Life is able to get in at the ground level. And I know one of the things that I found most important in my journey was immediately in my freshman year, I had a group. And they were a good group of people. They were a good group of guys. And I see a lot of my clients and family members, friends and stuff who early on in those stages of trying to find your identity, they connected with the wrong people. And it's an uphill battle for there. To talk to me a little bit about how important that is.
Yeah. I mean, I think the other word I'd throw in there is place of safety, a safe place. I think more so than ever, kids are looking for somewhere that's safe. And so, and I would say friend groups are becoming more and more small than ever before. Most kids run around in packs of 2 or 3 rather than larger groups. And I think a lot of that is because of safety, just, places where they feel safe to be themselves, who they identify with. And so, and they may have a couple different groups that they run around with, but, back when I was in high school, you would just hang out with everybody.
Yeah, right. We had a huge group.
Yeah. And I think anymore you're looking at small friend groups and that don't really interact with other groups.
That's interesting.
Just even sit around with high school kids and talking to them. They don't know most of their classmates. And some of that is probably being online and stuff like that. But,
sure.
I think in terms of the day-to-day interaction, they really only interact with a handful of students and friends on a daily basis. So I think it's important. I think it's.
I think one of the other things too, and I've used you as a resource in therapy when I'm working with kids and seeing, especially a client of mine who is a high school student who's not connecting. I've called you and said, hey, who's the leader in this area? I need somebody to reach out to this kid. And so talk to me a little bit. If I'm a parent right now and I'm listening to the podcast and I've got a teen at home who is isolating, who's not connecting, what are some things that they can do? They're listening to this and going, wow, Young Life sounds like something that would be great for my kid. What are some things that they can do to kind of connect?
Yeah, I would even say even before that, I think what kids need from any adult is just to slow down. I think to slow down and listen. And that might not come easy. That might not come quickly. But as a Young Life leader, that's really all we're doing is showing up in kids' lives and slowing down and listening and paying attention. And kind of everything we do kind of comes out of that. So I think for even a parent to slow down and just take time to listen and to react to what is going on in their kids' lives, I think is super important, because I think there's things that they're already telling us that we're just not listening to, that we're just kind of moving along, and I think the pressures that they're experiencing right now I didn't experience that when I was in high school.
Yeah.
And for me to respond in a way that I understand, I think the best thing we can do is just slow down.
Yeah.
And in terms of young life is the chances of young life being in your community are probably pretty good. Young life's been around for a long time, and but there's probably some type of young life in a community near you at least. So what I would say is jump on Young Life's national website, www.younglife.org. There is a tab there that says Young Life near you, and you can type in your zip code and connect with someone who's on staff in your area, and then they can let you know where there's Young Life near you, and there might be Young Life in your community. And I would also say if there's not Young Life in your community, I guarantee you that the staff person is looking to try and get Young Life going in your community.
Yeah.
So you might even be a great resource of someone that they can connect with and talk about, hey, how can we get Young Life going in your community?
That's good. You and I are reading a book together, and I just blanked on the name.
Hurt
2.0. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I found interesting what the author was talking about, and probably it's been going on for a long time, but I think that our culture now, teens, from the time they wake up to the time when they go to bed, have had such scheduled, rigid days, meaning a lot of times early in the morning they've got events going on before school, whether that's an academic or sporting event. Then they have a full school day. Then they go to sports afterwards, and they've got studying to do. And what the author was pointing out was a lot of times these kids don't have their own time to do what they want to do. And what we're finding, and I've noticed this, and I'm glad the author brought that to light, is that these kids are staying up till 2 o'clock in the morning, and that's where they're connecting with their friends on devices and on the internet and all this stuff. And so one of the issues that I've been addressing is the sleep issues, that these kids are not sleeping because they're staying up till 2 and they got to be ready for school at 6. But we've got to be able to allow them to have their outlets. And, sometimes I know for me, years and years ago, football, basketball, and baseball, I was in junior high and high school playing 3 sports, and you would have thought I was on a pro schedule. I mean, we were doing 2-a-days, and we weren't even done with football, and basketball would start. And I look back and think, man, before I went to bed in the summer, I would have to hit 100 free throws before I went to bed. I'm 40. I haven't shot a free throw in 20 years, but it's I think there's a lot of times that there's just so much going on in our lives that kids don't really have enough time to be kids. And that book I thought was really good in pointing that out. And I think that's a book that you guys have been using for leaders. And I'm not through it yet. I'm only a couple chapters in, but just something that I was made very aware of is that I have found a lot of kids are rebelling because they don't have any of their own time. Does that make sense? Have you noticed that at all with kids?
Yeah, and I even, something I would even say to that is, as when we talk about Young Life and doing fun things with kids are more likely to do service things than to come to something that's just fun where they get to be kids. Mm-hmm. And I don't think it's because they don't want to. I just think that's how their life is kind of being laid out for them, is that this is more valuable for me to go do something that is scheduled, requires something of me, that the end result I could put on a resume or something like that, than for me to go do something fun. I just think kids are kind of trained to think that way. And so, yeah, I absolutely see it, that schedules are full. I feel that they are guide kids' lives is their schedule. I think there's a lot asked of kids in terms of to perform than before. I think it's great to ask a lot of kids, but I think what's being asked is that they would perform.
Yes. We live in a performance-based culture. There's no question. Yeah. And I think that's a lot of times where kids get well into adulthood. I mean, I work with adults that have a screwed up idea of who God is because they feel like they constantly have to perform at a level to be accepted. Mm-hmm. And that's the system that we have set up. If I get an A, I get love. If I perform well on the field, I get love. My parents show me, it's like if I get a C, now I'm disappointed in you. And so we understand that, and then we project that on to who God is, which is why we have such a misunderstanding of Christianity in this culture of going, well, I'm a good person. That means it has nothing to do with it. But I think it's because it's so rooted in I am appreciated and cared for when I do well versus who I am, which is, that's been an age-old issue that's been around forever, but performance is a big problem, and something that I think that I don't think it's, I don't want people to misconstrue what I'm saying is that I think kids should be in sports, and I think kids should be participating in extracurriculars, but we also have to look at the fact, why are they rebelling about going to bed at 11 o'clock and wanting to stay up playing video games, till 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning with their friends? It's because that's their time. And we're not being mindful of how important sometimes that is. And I think oftentimes with at least clients that I've noticed, that time that they're doing that time, they end up trickling into unhealthy things with their life versus allowing them to have their time. I had a conversation with a kid, senior in high school, and he is exhausted. He's like, I have been running on 3 hours of sleep for 4 years of high school, and it's driving me nuts, but it's not worth giving up going to bed at 10:30 or 11. I'm not willing to do that because that time from 11 till 2 is so important to me. And it was just kind of like, wow. And it's like, because the rest of the day is everybody else's. I'm doing stuff for everybody else, and that time is mine. And so I'm willing to sacrifice my mental and emotional and physical health because that's so important to me. And it was like, wow, that's pretty telling, which is why I think that book made a highlight of that. And I was like, wow, that's really, really an issue that kids face.
Yeah. And just even going back to what you said about sports, sports is where I learned, that's where all my friends, like you were saying, that's where you developed your friendships. That's where I learned how to work hard. That's where I learned how to deal with hard things, when I failed, and then I'd have to come back the next day and try again. Yeah. And I think it's the priority shifted where now I'm doing this to perform rather than to learn how to be a friend, how to be a good teammate, how to develop qualities of hard work, and how to respond to failure. So I think that shifted to just performance. Yeah,
that's good. So my wife and I, we love Young Life, and her history and my history is so rooted in Young Life, and we've been blessed to be able to serve on our area's committee. If somebody's listening and they want to get involved, and maybe that's a, serving of some kind or financially, like what are some things that if somebody's listening going, you know what, I've been impacted by Young Life, or I've never even heard of it, but I want to be a part of it somehow. Like what are some things that you might be looking for?
Young Life doesn't exist without volunteers. Those are the heroes of the mission. People who care about kids, but also care that they would know who Jesus Christ is. And so you would never be told no. You'd never be turned away. So I would say there are opportunities to serve in a lot of different ways. That could be on the ground, showing up at a high school. There are heroes in the mission that are 60 years old still showing up at a high school, impacting kids. So there's age does not disqualify you for being in Young Life, but there's a lot of other ways to serve too, whether it's on a local committee. Young Life does not exist without adults serving on a committee who are praying and investing in this ministry in that way. So. But there's a multitude of other ways to serve too. There's a lot of things that go on organizationally with Young Life throughout the year. It's banquets, it's connecting leaders to other parents, because that's such a big part, especially in today's culture. So what I would say the best way is to connect with your area staff person. And the best way to do that is just to jump on Young Life's national website and just see where Young Life's near you. And I guarantee you that if there's not Young Life in your community, there are people who are praying who would want Young Life,
which might be a part of it. That they may need some more people to bring support to that area. And I know we're trying to get Young Life in every school district and every school in the world. And you might be listening to this right now, and you might be the vehicle that brings Young Life to that community if it's not there. And I want to put a caveat in there. Mark was talking about, getting into ground level, going to schools. I'm not encouraging anybody just to go to a school.
Right. Yeah.
Let's do it with representation. So if you're thinking, oh, this is a great idea, I'm just going to go hang out at a high school. Young Life has permission to go into schools, and we're not just showing up without that. So I think
that's good.
It's very important as people are listening that that's something that the areas are working out with high schools to make the schools aware of who's on Young Life staff and who's going to be in the building, so that just random people aren't going to schools. So I think that's important.
And just even for parents out there who son or daughter might be spending time with a Young Life leader, even from an organizational standpoint, all our leaders are background checked. They're trained. Right. There's people who are kind of overseeing that. Just so Young Life is something that parents can be comfortable with.
That's right.
That it can be trusted. So we go through a lot of measures to make sure that kids are safe and that this ministry is something that the parents can trust.
Yep. So a couple of highlights is there's a couple events during the course of the year that most areas have. Like we have a golf event coming up that if you're interested in sponsoring a whole, if you're in the area, in the Northeast Ohio area, and want to put a team together, you can do that. And you can probably go to the website and also see that. We have a annual banquet where we fundraise for the year. And then there's other ways to give to your area as well. And it's a great ministry. It's been around for a very long time. And I think it's unique because Young Life has really understood where kids are at and not trying to get kids to fit into their ministry, but the ministry fits into who kids are. And so, Mark, I appreciate you. I thank you so much for spending some time with me and representing our area of Young Life. And there's such a rich history here of Young Life. And it's so interesting to me, all these areas, there's so many different churches, and I get to visit a lot of different churches and places, and almost all the time I'll see somebody in a church in leadership and I'm like, I was in Young Life with him. It's crazy to me. It's like whether it's one of the schools in our district or churches or whatever, I run into Young Life people, and it's like, it's amazing to me how much Young Life has impacted, just from my perspective, Northeast Ohio on so many levels. And it's fascinating, and it is wonderful to see how God has utilized this ministry. And I'm telling you what, I think it's so important that we invest in our kids, and we're seeing that generation after generation after generation, that if you don't do that, we're missing out on our future. And I very, 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 very much appreciate what you do. My wife and I kind of support from a committee role in the background, but what you're doing, we just want to give you every ounce of prayer and resources that you need to be able to do what you do, and we appreciate that so much.
Well, we're grateful, Matt. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark, for sharing your time and heart for Young Life and the desire to be a light in the lives of so many teens. If you have questions about Young Life or wonder if there is a Young Life near you, check out younglife.org. There's a lot of great resources out there for kids, and Young Life is just one of them. We have a lot of hurting people in this world, and I know a lot of it comes from not being connected or having a purpose, feeling like you're being heard or feeling like you're being cared for. That's why I love this ministry, because it fills in a lot of those gaps. If you're feeling like you might need therapy, or maybe your child might need to see a therapist, Emerge is seeing new clients right now, and we are represented in the state of Ohio and Pennsylvania currently. We are growing, and very soon we'll be in many more states to come. Check out our website, emerge.org, for more information on that. Well, thanks for listening, and until next time, or when our Savior comes, God bless.